What's going on? Move the Mouse here, back in City Skylines with our how-to episode number 4. And this is when things start to get a little bit tricky, not necessarily from a city building perspective, but from making these episodes kind of bite-sized and consumable, because we've unlocked a ton of stuff at the Tiny Town milestone. Mostly everything that we've talked about so far is vanilla game content, though we did introduce green cities with self-sufficient buildings and organic and local produce specializations in the last episode. This milestone that we want to talk about today does add a ton of things like park areas from the Park Life DLC, industry areas from the Industries DLC, and I want to do kind of a focus on each one of those DLCs in its own separate how-to episode. So we will skip over a couple things for today. I want to dive into landscaping first. We'll talk about pedestrian and bike paths also. Now, a lot of the ones that you see on screen are specific to Park Life, but you still have access to some in the plain game. Then I want to talk about the new buildings that we've unlocked, but most importantly, the high school. I'm going to pause the game, and I'm going to save the game, because this can get very expensive very fast. So now that it's saved and we won't be wasting our money, I want to come over here, because this is a good hill we can work with, just show you some of these tools. So the first tool is the Shift Terrain tool. A on Xbox, X on PlayStation, left click on PC will raise the terrain. And then X, square, or right click will lower that terrain. Now you also have the ability to change the size and the strength of the brush. So with a really large, strong brush, it's going to make a more pointed peak. If we turn the strength down, it's going to do it much softer. Right? You can eventually get to the same spot. It just takes it a little longer. Now, if we were to do that with a smaller brush, but the strength all the way up, you can make these really jagged, fine peaks. And same thing, we can hit X to bring it all down. Now, next tool over is the level terrain tool. And if we wanted to kind of smooth out this nonsense that we made right here, again, you can change the size or the strength. You can hit the X button to choose the target position. And then we've defined that as the height we want to conform to. And now anything that we run over will adhere to that same height. And we can start to eat into this mountain. But we don't have enough money now. I've already used up all my money, and that's exactly what I was saying. This gets very expensive very fast. So the next tool over is the Soften Terrain tool, and this has two modes. You can soften terrain by holding A, X, or left click, and do it to a stronger effect with X, square, or right click. So you'll notice that as you have steeper slopes in the terrain, the grass stops growing and you have kind of rocky outcroppings. So I can use this tool to smooth it, which will make the slope more gradual, but it will also allow grass to grow in there. And then if we use the X button, you have a kind of a more drastic effect. But they're both extremely useful for creating a little bit smoother slope. Let's see if we have anything that's kind of, you know, jagged like the coastline here. So see how we have a smoother slope over there. We can smooth that out a bit if we wanted to. Make it a little bit less abrupt. Now, you can't really do that, though, around buildings that are already moved in. So you'll notice that as these buildings move in, they start to flatten the lot that they're moving into, so it carves some of this terrain out. If we wanted to fix that after the fact, we can smooth it a little bit. But you don't actually change terrain where roads are. So if I have a road, for example, like this, and then we wanted to lower the terrain around it, you could do that, but it's not going to affect the road. It doesn't affect things that are already zoned, as you can see. So if you wanted to adjust the terrain, do that before you plop anything down, and then you won't run into problems like this. And since we're out of money, we'll reload one more time and take a look at the slope tool. So you basically set a point, kind of like we did with the level terrain, but in this case, instead of leveling it, we're going to build a slope to that point. So if we wanted a gradual slope to occur from here all the way up to there, it'll it'll do exactly that. So it'll create a nice smooth slope running that entire distance. Now, obviously, if we did that at a shorter range like this, it's going to be a steeper slope to get up there. But you can kind of smooth everything out that way and make a little bit more natural incline. But again, we are out of cash because these things get very expensive. So let me load again and we'll jump through some of the other tools that you have access to in the landscaping. One of the ones that I like the best is over here, the trees tab. Now with this, we can plop down individual trees if we wanted to. We'll drop some in the middle of our highway here and we could switch different tree types. There's shrubberies, all sorts of different things in here. Now, if you repeatedly plop down a tree, it's going to give you slightly different variations of those trees. So you can see they're different heights. Over here, there'll be, again, different heights and consistencies. So most of these have multiple models. Now, if you just want to plop down, again, an individual tree, you can do that. Easy enough. But you can also use the size and strength brush if we want to turn this all the way up. And now we can fill in a ton of trees all at once and just litter our map with it. You'll notice that the farmland goes from yellow to green. It's basically turning this into forestry. So do keep that in mind, that you can drop a bunch of trees down, but if I remove them, I'm doing that with the X button or square. On PC, you're going to need probably the extra landscaping tools mod is a really useful one, because I don't think we have that brush by default on PC. But keep in mind that when you plop down trees, you're forever getting rid of fertile farmland and making that a forestry area. I wish it didn't do that, but unfortunately it does. So keep that in mind. We've basically blown out all that farmland over here. But that's okay, because we're not saving it. We're ignoring those problems in the background. We're just going through some of these tools to kind of take you through that. Now there are walls and fences, and you can run those, you know, parallel to stuff. You have the curved option, freeform option, and you can upgrade these also. So those work basically the same way as the road tools. So I don't think we need to go into too much detail there, but it's a nice way to detail a park or a little area with some of those fence objects. Something that's a little bit more useful, I think, especially in endgame design, are going to be the canals and water structures. So we've got a couple different things here. If you know an area is prone to flooding, you can build a flood wall. And same as before, you can create straight, curved, freeform. So if water was going to overflow up here, it'll run into that wall first. Now you also have the ability to do keys if you want to do kind of a zoning right up to the shoreline. So let me show you this. If we build a road right here, right along the shore, that's actually going to let us zone all the way up to the water. That's kind of weird. So that doesn't always let you do that. What you can do, because you don't necessarily want your houses like right there on the beach, you can create keys. And basically what you do is just, this needs a water edge to run along. So it has to be placed on water. I can't place it up here. Shoreline required. Now there is a mod called Key Anarchy if you're on PC. So that is an option for you. But in the case of console players, you've got to really kind of follow the shoreline. But what that does is it's going to flatten everything out so that you can have nice, smooth zoning without the risk of flooding, because it's raising up the coast to build that wall. Again, now if we do roads, I'll do a freeform road so we can kind of try and follow this curve. And if you put the bubble kind of right on the edge of that, that's basically where it's going to be able to zone. And then we can just kind of follow that curve along, like so. Now we've got nice, smooth, zonable coastline that isn't at risk of flooding. So that is a really useful tool. And another great tool that is one of my favorites for endgame is designing canals, and specifically for the purpose of handling sewage and water. So if you have a ton of water pumps, they're eventually going to suck up the water and kind of dry up the riverbed here. Now this is a pretty wide river. It probably won't be too problematic on this map. But if you have all your water intake for an entire map all in the same spot, sometimes it'll create some water flow problems. So what you can do, especially late game, and especially if you have the Green Cities DLC, is you can draw canals. I'm just going to do a straight canal. It could even be kind of parallel to our coast here. And that will eventually fill up with water. If I throw it on 3 times speed, it'll happen a little bit faster. But with these walls, you can actually clamp water structures to them. So for example, if we wanted to pull in water, we could do that. We could hook that up to the rest of our water network, and we'd be good to go. But the other thing that you can do, again, later end game, is when you have green cities, you have what's called the eco water treatment plant, and this completely removes water pollution. So what you can do, and I'm going to do this with a standard sewage pump for right now, but you could have, for example, sewage on one side, water on the other, but when you have the eco-friendly water treatment plant, you're removing 100% of the pollution from it. So as you pour clean water out, you can suck it right back up on the other side with the water pumping service. You'll notice that the first time it comes through there, it kind of floods over. I wish I had built a flood wall to show you that. You can't build on water though, so I can't place one now. But that should smooth out eventually. It's just kind of bulging over as the water catches up. It doesn't really know what to do. But you can build right on the edge and literally clamp those water structures right next to the canals. So again, that's one of my favorite things to do end game, because I generally have, you know, kind of water structures everywhere or all along the coast. And I like to then kind of find a spot, clean them up, and do a nice, neat row of water treatment and water intake facilities. But you can see now that that flood is subsiding. But that I find is a very useful trick. So you can use canals to, you know, create some water and interesting structures in your towns. And then, of course, you can build bridges over them. So if we wanted to, we can come up one notch, up on the D-pad, or page up on computer. So you can do some interesting things there. You can do the same thing with pedestrian paths, which are also on the landscaping tool here. So we have pavement paths for pedestrians. I can bring that over the water and then bring it back down. Now, I don't know if I mentioned this before, but if you want a nice smooth slope, there's kind of a sweet spot. So if we go right to the edge here and bring it over, it's going to maintain that elevation. And then let's say I wanted to obviously get pedestrians on there. You can have these really steep, awkward slopes. They don't really look that great. This one looks much more natural. It is a little bit long. You can kind of curve it around if you wanted to. But basically how you can do those, and it works kind of the same for roads as it does for pedestrian paths. You don't want to end that road too abruptly. So if I just do this really short length, it's going to have that really steep slope. The sweet spot is 12 units on roads if you're up one elevation click. So that big line is 10. If I go out 2 more clicks, that's a nice smooth slope. If I go out 1 more, it shortens it and it makes it a steeper slope. So if you go out to 12 and then continue building your road, that's generally how you get a nice smooth slope. But in a nutshell, I think that's the most important highlights of the landscaping tools: raising and lowering terrain, leveling terrain, smoothing and creating inclines. You have all kinds of pedestrian paths, bicycle paths as well. Those are only for bicycles, not for pedestrians. And you can intersect these with roads. Or I shouldn't say intersect with roads. You have to come very close to the road, like that, and that will automatically connect. And there's a little bike path for people to come down. You do have roads that have bike paths built into them. I don't believe we've unlocked them yet. We haven't. So you'll unlock some more decorative roads soon enough, with grass, with trees, with bike lanes. So those will all be options. And bicycles are great for getting traffic off the road. Now, I think I've ignored the problems long enough. Let me see if there's anything else I wanted to mention in the landscaping tab. You have vegetation now. So this is if you want to create kind of, you know, some brush around little areas. But you can't overlap it with other objects, unfortunately. So you kind of get these weird dead zones. This is a lot easier on PC with things like Move It Mod. But you can add a little bit of color or life to an area that otherwise would have seemed a little less alive. Certainly when you have an entire map of flat farmland grass, even just little shrubs stand out quite a bit. I like to add shrubbery and trees and also rocks over here. You can do different rock structures. Again, something that I like a little bit better on PC because you can get kind of objects right on top of one another. You can hit the D-pad left or right to rotate them. And it will let you overlap these a bit, but not enough. But you can still do some interesting things there. Pop a tree in the middle of it. Decorate a median, whatever you might want to do. See if we can we get a tree in there? Why not? So you can do some stuff with that, again, just to bring life to little areas. This obviously is just an example. This is not how I would decorate a roundabout. But with all that out of the way, let's load up our save game one more time and get back to the actual build. So let's take stock of where we're at. So if we go into info views and education, our elementary school is a little lacking. We've got one school for the entire town. We have no high schools. We have not yet unlocked university. So let's cover that first. Let's at least get one more elementary school in. We'll throw that in up here. Now, since this is a Green Cities neighborhood, let's do a Green Cities school. And I'm actually going to overwrite this farmland that's over here. I don't particularly care for it, so we'll drop that in right there. And then high school wise, I'm going to use the old school high school. And let's build a new spot for it. Now, it's worth pointing out that I am running the game on 3x speed right now so that I can make as much money as possible and so that I don't have to build stuff offline. But if you're new to the game, I would recommend pausing it from time to time, especially when you hit milestones and taking a look at all the things that you've just unlocked. Because it's easy for those problems to get away from you if you aren't paying attention to them and addressing them. Like right now, I'm running behind on dropping a high school in here. Now, I'm going to do this so that it intersects with this road here rather than this road, because I want the traffic turning in and out to be on the side road whenever possible. Now, in order to do that, if you want it on this same corner, you can kind of drag the control stick away from that and get it to reorient itself. So we've got a high school now. That is good coverage for certainly this area down here. I don't think it extends all the way up here. So we could drop in another one up there, but I'm not as worried about that yet. Let's extend our water network. Good enough for now, and it looks like power is spreading there. Now we have a problem cropping up here, and you can see some of the commercial buildings are getting abandoned. Now, if you want to find out what that problem is, you can go to the inspector, or if you're on PC, just without a tool selected, click on the building, and it will tell you exactly what that problem is. Not enough educated workers. And that's my fault, because I hadn't dropped the high school in yet. We're busy talking about previous milestones while I'm letting the city play. And again, that's one of the reasons why you might want to pause the game from time to time. But also, that's why I'm letting it play nonstop, is so that I can kind of be ahead of where we are talking each episode, so I don't have to wait to build up money. And it just makes it easier for me to record this series in a way that I think is useful, because I'm not going to skip anything in the building of this town. Like, you're going to be able to see it all on camera. But that's not necessarily the easiest thing to do if I'm not playing it at 3x speed the whole time. We need people. We need to make money. I guess we'll go a little bit short on that one. I'm going to zone all this out as residential. What we might do is convert this secondary street to commercial and then have all the residential stuff in behind there. But I'm just going to fill this out for now. Give our citizens more places to move in, because they're dying to move into our town. And maybe we could even extend these out just a little bit for a little bit more room. little bit more residential space. But let me just provide just a little bit more room for people to move in. Maybe we'll come down here one more block. And this one will make a little bit tighter. I'm going to go 10 units. So it's right on top of one another. I'm not going to go all the way here, though. I don't want to have intersections too often. So let's come down at least one more, if not two more, before we intersect with that road. And I think 3 more makes sense. So we'll do this. We'll intersect here. And then we'll bring these over. And again, I'm just making room for people to move in because we have all that residential demand right now. So let's do that. We'll zone some commercial because we'll need it soon. We don't need it right now. You don't want to get too far ahead of your zoning. But, again, I've done this before. So let's do that. We'll do a little bit of a buffer here. And then we'll do that in commercial. And I want to fill the rest of this in with residential. Again, just giving people space to move in because they want it. So that should fill in. We'll wait to zone the rest of this and see what we do over here. Eventually, we're going to want to carry a bridge over this water. And I think it makes sense to kind of jump off from here. So the only building that I really had to talk about this episode was the high school. We hadn't dropped that in yet. You need to educate your citizens to get them to work at commercial jobs, or even industrial jobs have highly educated worker slots. But if you want to get office space, which is nice because it meets industrial demand but it doesn't pollute, it's important to educate your population. Now, one thing that we did unlock is the leisure tab here. And essentially this is parks, plazas, things to kind of decorate your city. And these can be really, really useful for raising land value. Now, let's take a look at that. So if we go into info views and look for the money sign, this is our land value. And you want it to be as green as possible. You can see we've got a lot of stuff that's slightly in the blue. Land value is pretty good right here in the residential area. But if we can improve that, the more the land is worth, the more tax revenue you make. So it's a nice return on investment. A nice, cheap way to do it is with the basketball, tennis court, and dog park. Those seem to be kind of the best. Let me drop in a basketball court maybe right next to the high school. And you can see that has a happiness effect. We'll throw a tennis court over here. And again, another happiness effect. Let's let that play at 3 times speed for a minute. And let's go back into our info views. And you can see that, actually, I'm glad you got to see that draw. That dramatic effect that it has on the land value in an area. So any of these parks will help out with that. They have upkeep costs, so if you look at them, they cost a certain amount to drop in, and then there's a certain amount of upkeep. So if we put this, where's a good spot we can put this over here? I guess we could come over here and start to support this part of the map. And again, we'll try and quickly get over to our info views, and it already drew in. It's because I was playing it at 3 times speed. If we pause it, let's drop a couple parks in. I don't know if you saw that green arrow right there, but that's exactly what we want. That is a building leveling up. So it'll actually change its visual appearance. And higher level buildings and higher educated people produce less garbage, can work at better jobs, and generate more tax revenue for the city. So their houses will actually get upgraded, and we can see that happening all over the place here. Just by raising the land value, we get upgraded, more modern, better looking houses. We've got new people moving in. Let's pause it and let's drop in a couple more. So we'll go back over here. I like, again, the basketball and tennis courts because they're relatively cheap. They provide good entertainment, no noise pollution, no pollution, and the upkeep is really low also. Now, if you have a Paradox account, you can sign in with that at the main menu on either console or PC, and that will unlock Paradox Plaza. This is a really good one because it's cheaper than those last two, both in terms of placement and in terms of upkeep. It doesn't quite have the same entertainment value, but it is a lot cheaper overall. So if you wanted to spam these all over your town, you certainly could. Let's drop a couple of them in. We'll put one there. We'll throw one up here. Probably I've got to fix that water problem. So let's bring up our info views again, land value, and keep an eye on everything here. And we'll hit play at 3 times speed. And now our area down here is actually starting to tip towards the green almost, right? We're seeing some improvement over there. So levels are really important for maxing out the revenue of your city. So little investments like dropping in plazas and parks, as well as making sure that you have good service coverage, that helps too. So make sure everybody has access to healthcare. Have we dropped in a cemetery yet? No, we have not. Let me pause. Let me see when we unlock that. If that's the next milestone, we'll start the next episode with that. If it isn't, I may not have dropped this in yet. Okay, we did unlock it at the Boomtown milestone. So we'll drop that in the next episode. Let's fix the problems that we have for right now, and then we'll call it quits for this episode of the how-tos. Oh, and someone pointed this out in the comments. I'm glad you caught it. I saw it in the edit. I didn't see it when I was building this. I didn't actually zone this. So I built a district, defined it as forestry, but I never zoned it. So we have a little bit of demand right now. I'm hoping that will fill in, but good catch for the commenter who noticed that. I forgot to zone it. So we're having water problems. I called up the info views. I didn't say anything about it. We have limited availability. So there's 2 reasons you might have availability problems. Well, I guess 3. One is, are the pipes connected and carrying water? You can kind of see where it runs out. So what we can look at, first thing to check is budget. So if you're running under budget, the facilities that you have aren't going to be doing as much. So just simply raising that should solve our problem there. We'll let it play and catch up for a minute. And we're good to go there. We are having electricity problems. Again, if we go into budget, we can see that our electricity is at 100%. So we just don't have enough power plants to meet the electricity needs of our city. So let's come back over here. We'll go on to electricity. We'll drop in one more coal power plant. Now, whichever you use is totally fine. Wind can be a really good option on some maps. In fact, it looks like it's a pretty good option on this map. Be very good, actually. But the thing that I don't like is I don't want windmills everywhere. They're actually kind of a nice visual touch if you're kind of building something up on the mountains. And I tend to use them more on PC for decoration. But whatever you choose to do, it's the same principles. You need to produce enough, you need to make sure the budget's there, and you need to make sure it's connected. So if we hit play here, everything should even itself right out. There we go. Now over here, we haven't talked about this icon yet, but we have not enough workers. So sometimes it's a matter of moving more people in nearby. Other times it might be a matter of giving them a way to get here from our major population centers. So mass transit options like metro or bus, we will talk about those in a future episode. And again, we'll talk about things like the park areas from Park Life, the industry area from Industries DLC. We'll talk about all those things each in their own separate episode. I wanted to cover kind of the base mechanics here and things that are really good highlights, and we'll skip a couple things to circle back to those. So stay tuned for more on that front. But that about does it for this episode. So if you're new here, subscribe and hit the bell to get notifications so you'll get updates on new episodes in the series. Follow me on Twitter and join the Discord if you want to get involved in discussion with other like-minded fans of cities and of the channel. And until the next one, this is Move the Mouse, signing off.